Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today, we're going to start this Yevamot daf Nun Zayin. We're going to begin on Nun Vav Amud Beis by the Mishnah. So you have an almana l'kohen gadol. So a widow is not allowed to marry a kohen gadol. That's a lav, as well as a gerush b'chalutz l'kohen hedget. A woman who is divorced is not allowed to marry a regular kohen, and for that matter, a woman who had chalitza cannot marry a regular kohen. So if, let's say, it was min ha'erison, says Rashi, lo yoichel b'truma. Once there was a kedushin, the Kohen did kedushin to the gerusha, the Kohen gadol did kedushin to the widow. Let's say her father's also a Kohen, so she was always able to eat truma because her father was a Kohen. But once she already had kedushin by these men, that already will passel her because she was not supposed to marry these men, and it was an avera. So therefore, it's going to be no longer can she eat truma. However, says the Mishnah, it's actually a machlokas. Reb Shimon machshirin. Why? Rashi says only achetiboyaloi, only until bia. Of course, once the Kohen has bia with the grusha, or the Kohen gadol with the almana, then certainly she can no longer eat truma. However, that only then because of a tiyasa chalola. Only once there's bia, that's when she becomes a chalola. She'll profane her child with him, the product of this relationship, as well as her herself. That's only once they actually had bia. However, until that point, she's still allowed to eat truma. So it's a machokas. However, in this armulu or in this garshu, let's say that these men, this Kohen, or this Kohen gadol, she became a widow or a gerusha. So minha nesuin pasulos. And the question is, now she's going back to her father's house. But if she was already had nesuin with them, she's puzzled because she was a chalala from the time of the bia. Min erisin kasheros. However, if let's say the Kohen gadol died and she only performed erisin, so then she's kosher. The chiddush is that Afil Rameir, even according to the first opinion, will puzzle min erisin ella b'chayehen demishtameres labia puzzle avol mesulo. The whole issue is because there's the anticipation that probably this Kohen gadol is eventually going to have bia with this woman who he did kedushin with. However, once the Kohen gadol dies, she goes back to her original status, and now she's able to eat truma again. That's according to all shitas. The whole machlokas is a woman who was a bas kohen, and at the time of kedushin, does that passel her from eating truma? Tanya Umra Meir Kavachaymer. So Meir says, I'll discuss with you and tell you at Kavachaymer why this should be the case. That once it's shas erison, no longer she eats truma. Ma kedushi rishus. When it comes to a kedushi rishus, says Rashi, in Yisrael shekidish bas kohen. If a regular non-kohen who marries the daughter of a kohen, which of course there's no avera in that. A non-kohen can marry a bas kohen, so that's kedushi rishus. In machilin kedushi in machilin. At the moment that kedushin took place, this bas kohen is no longer able to eat truma. So once erison happens, it obviously has an effect to change her status. So kedushi avera lo kol shekain. Certainly, the fact that she had kedushin with, let's say the case of a Kohen gadol almana, this widow had kedushin with the Kohen gadol, and certainly we should say that she won't be able to eat truma anymore. So I'm a little low. When it came to again the Israel who married the bas kohen, the reason why she could no longer eat truma, because he's a Yisrael, right? Because he's not able to eat. But makam acher, timer b'kedushi aver shechein yishlo lahachil b'makam acher. However, in this case, it could be eaten b'makam acher. In other words, in this situation, it's shaykh that this Kohen is able to eat. The whole question is the status of this woman who was a bas kohen. So the fact is, her husband is never allowed to eat truma. So she's going potentially, eventually, into this house. However, when it comes to this man who's the Kohen gadol with the almana, so we say that she is able to eat in another situation. She could have stayed by her father's house, and this Kohen also is able to eat. So Amar Rav Eliezer, Amar Rabbi Yishia, Patsua Dak Kohen Koyin Shekidish Bas Yisrael Bonu Machlokes Rameir Rabbi Elazar. So a Petzua Daka, someone who has this situation where their beitza, where their testicles are crushed, so such an individual will also passel her if you would have bia, and that's a din deraisa. So because of that, it would be the same thing if there's a Petzua Daka who's a kohen who has Mekadosh Bas Yisrael, even though normally you would think she should be able to eat truma once she's married, but the fact is it's a machlokas Rameir and Rabbi Elazar, Rav Shimon. Rameir de Omer Mishmaris Labia Psul Deraisa Lu Ochla Hanamu Lu Ochla. When Rameir said, when it comes to a woman who's a widow waiting to have bia with this kohen gadol, so even although only kedushin was done, she's usher to eat. So Hanamu Lu Ochla. So too when it comes to the case of a Petzua Daka, a kohen who's a Petzua Daka, who's Mekadosh Bas Yisrael, at that moment she becomes no longer she's not able to eat truma. Now, of course, we know in general, says Rashi, Petzua Daka Mishtameres Labia Pasal Deraisi. Okay, so it's the same machlokas, Rameir and Rav Shimon, Rabbi Elazar, Rav Shimon, Rameir. So Rameir Diarmei Mishtameres Labia Pasal Deraisa Lo Achla So Hanam Lo Achla. Rabbi Elazar, Rav Shimon Diarmei Mishtameres Labia Psul Deraisa Achla So Hanami Achla. So he says the same thing, that just like over there, one was allowed to continue to eat this Bas Kohen, even though this woman who was a widow, she married, she did kedushin with a Kohen Gadol, but still she's able to eat. So too, Bas Kohen, a Kohen rather, who was a Petzua Daka, also she's able to eat. The kinyan kasmo he b'yochelas tvar Torah. It's talking about midiraisa, right? A Bas Yisrael is allowed to midiraisa technically be able to eat. We still say midrabbanan not, as we saw in the previous daf. So how do we know that we're going to compare our case of a kohen gadol almana who did kedushin with this widow, that she could eat the machlokas, whether she could eat truma at that time, because again she's a Bas Kohen, to the case of a Petzua Daka Kohen, Dilmat kan loy kamer Rabbi Elazar, Rav Shimon Hasam. Maybe the only reason why Rabbi Elazar, Rav Shimon said over there that this woman could eat because the Kohen could give truma to a woman he marries if she's not a gerusha. In other words, he has the ability to give truma. So maybe that's the reason why he's lenient over there. However, in this situation, he could not do so, because Rashi says, there's no woman that is mutter to this man. A Petzua Daka cannot go into Kahal Hashem. So there's a huge difference. When we talk about the Kohen Gadol, he's allowed to marry a woman if she's not a Grusha or an Almana, if she's a Basula. Of course, he could marry. But Petzua Daka can't. So therefore, maybe that there's that huge distinction, that the only time they're lenient is when it comes to a case of a Kohen Gadol. At least there are instances where he could do kedushin correctly. However, here it would never work, and therefore, because of that, maybe they're more strict. And even at the time of kedushin, by the Petzua Daka, it would not work, and she would not be able to do truma. What are you talking about? It's Shaykh b'bas gerim, the daughter of a convert. It says Rashi Ksaver, Kahal gerim lo ikri kahal. That when it comes to a convert, they're not considered to be in Kahal Hashem. They in the Mechlal Yava Petzua Daka. So therefore, he would be able to actually marry. A Petzua Daka is allowed to marry a woman who is the daughter of a convert, and therefore Nasa beheter umachil b'truma. That would be a situation where even the Petzua Daka is able to get married. In a situation where, again, he's allowed to get married with a Bas Ger. That actually is not so pashut. That's actually a question whether or not in that situation the Bas Kohen the Bas Ger is able to actually eat truma in that case. Itmar. So he explains like this. To answer these difficulties, he says that since they ate it below yada, without bia, says Rashi, let's say, for example, the Kohen marries this woman, so they're married, so now, of course, she can eat truma. And then Vanasa P'tsuadaka, and then afterwards he becomes a P'tsuadaka. So which means he was not a P'tsuadaka originally. He did Kedushin, and she was eating truma, technically, Midaraisa is allowed, and then he becomes a P'tsuadaka afterwards. Uva Oleha, and then he has Tashmish with her, Lo Soichal Betruma, why? The Shavi Chalola, Shenivlo Apostolo, because when she had Bia, he's apostle, and so she becomes a chalola. V'im lo yada. However, let's say they didn't have bia. Mishanasa petsuadaka harizu achelas. Alma petsuadaka matzina petsuadaka kain machal b'makam acher. We actually find that it is shaykh that he could do kedushin with her and it's beheter. When he married her, he did kedushin before he was a petsuadaka, and then he becomes a petsuadaka. So there's kedushin. She could still eat truma l'chayra, maybe, which again we said is a question. But in that situation, he's allowed. It wasn't an avera. The kedushin was not a kedushi avera because he wasn't a b'suadaka at that time. So there aren't circumstances, and again this is without bia, because once he had bia, he will passel her. Question 1. Also TB12. Heich mishkachas lo kohen b'suadaka machil es ishto truma. How is it? When is it possible? So as we said, that he married her and then became a Betsuadaka, and so he's allowed to eat truma. She's allowed to eat truma l'kulayama. Here, the TB 12 says it a little bit differently. Heichmatzina Betsuadaka machlas ishto betruma l'kulayama. Here it actually adds a piece. Shanasa Betsuadaka acher shanasa isha v'lo yoda. Mishanasa B'tsuadaka. However, from the time he became a B'tsuadaka, he did not have bia with her. Okay. That's answer number 1. How you could say that they really are the same. It's the same thing as our case. Rabbi Omer Hoyel Umachila Ba'avadav Uveshivchaisav Hakananim. Because he's able to feed it to his servants and his avadim and his non-Jewish maidservants. So again, we see it is b'makam acher. He's able to give truma, maybe not to his wife, but we find that a b'suadaka kohen is able to give to his slaves. So Abaya uyamer karava. So the question is, why didn't Abaya say like Rava, which is the second answer? Because kinyan deishus, mekinyan deishus yalfinan. We want to compare when is he able to give his wife truma. You can't compare it. Okay, fine. The B'suadaka Kohen can give to his avadim, but how could we then learn out from that he would also be able to give to his wife? Why doesn't he say the case of Abaye about no bia? Shani hasam shkvar achla. It's different in that case because he was healthy and everything was fine, and that's the reason why he could eat. She can eat truma. However, in a situation where he was originally a psuadaka, that case we don't find. The svara of shekvar achla, we don't say such a thing. Because we don't say this. Bas Yisrael shenises a kohen. Let's say you have a Bas Yisrael and marries a kohen, which of course at the time when she's married to the kohen, she's allowed to eat truma. Umes, and then afterwards he dies. What? Teichel, she can continue to eat shikvar achla because she was already eating? No. The only reason why she was able to eat was because she was married to this kohen. Once the kohen dies, at that moment, that's it. She can't eat truma anymore. It doesn't matter what she did before. So you can say the same thing. We don't say this concept of, shikvar achla. That's not a svara, as we see by here. For Rava will say, hasam paka kinyane. When it comes to the case of the Kohen who died, the reason why, of course, everyone agrees, is because the kinyan, the relationship, is gone. And once he died, of course, she can't eat truma. But in this situation, they are still married. The only thing is that he became a Petsuadaka. But at the time of her eating, he was not a Petsuadaka yet. and therefore maybe in that case we do say shekvar achla. Gufa. So the Gemara continues and says the following, going back. B'minei Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Ishia, Patsua Dak Kayin, Shanasa Bas Gerim, Mahu Shachalena B'Truma. So actually we said it was really a machlokas, it's not a repashit. So you have a Patsua Dak Kayin, and he marries a Bas Ger, a daughter of a convert. So in that case, apparently, maybe we say that Kahal Gerim will Ikri Kahal, and therefore because that he's allowed to marry her, and therefore the question is maybe she can eat Truma. Ishtik. So that was a great person came afterwards. Upamine milsachrita, and they asked him a different question. Upashitle, and he answered it. Uman, who is this great person? Rishlaka. Shamu Rabbi Yehuda Nisil Rabbi Ishia atu what? Rabbi Yochanan love Gavarabba? You're telling me that Rabbi Yochanan was not a Gavarabba? They asked the question. Rabbi Yochanan asked the question. Rabbi Ishia, right? It says Bomine Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Ishia. Right? It was a question from Rabbi Ishia to Rabbi Yochanan. So he's a Gavarabba. She's saying Reish Lakish is the Gavarabba, not Rabbi Yochanan. To Rabbi Yochanan love Gavarabba who? So Amule the Kiboy Minoi Milsa Delesla Pasre. You're asking me a question that there is really no answer. Well, man, Il Rabbi Yehuda, if you want to tell me, again, the question is she able to eat truma in this situation where, again, she was a bas ger? So the question is, it depends on who you hold like. If it's like Rabbi Yehuda, ben b'kedushase koi, ben la b'kedushase koi, achla, whether the kohen maintains his kedusha or he does not maintain his kedusha, still holds that she's not allowed to eat this truma. Now, who's Rabbi Yehuda? So Rashi says as follows: Hashasu de kaboyla mafarish azal at seifo pashta of Rabbi Ishil pashta be midi the aminal el habidim in the east the mafarshi lesle patri in the strichla farish the man kaboyle ir Yehuda b'shibushu. Okay, so he said next Rashi, it doesn't matter if the kohen maintains his kedusha, as we see later on in Daf Ayin Vav. Miboyla, and they asked the question: Kohen suadaka mahu b'gioris. Is he allowed to marry a gioris, a convert? B'kedushasi koi ba'aser. Does the kohen maintain his kedusha, and therefore he's aser, and therefore he's not allowed to marry her, etc. V'acha ben b'kedushasi koi kohen shenasa suadaka. If it's, let's say he maintains his kedusha, right, which means that a kohen becomes a suadaka. Ben b'kedushas kohen koi v'aser b'chol asuras kahuna ben lab kedushasi koi ve'enu musar Melissa, Isha Paguma, Lo Achla. Or let's say that he's not in the Kedusha, namely that we're not strict. So he holds in all circumstances, according to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, they're not allowed to eat. She would not eat the Truma, right? So it was like the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Achla. Ibu Kedushasi, again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Achla. Ibu Kedushasi Koi Lo Achla. If the kohen maintains his kedusha, she can't eat da Omer Mar Basker Zachar Kabas Chol Zachar, because they say that the daughter of a male convert is just like the daughter of a male is the daughter of a male chol. So what do we see from that? And Rashi says Ubas Chol Psula Kahuna. According to this pshat, the daughter of a chol is pasal to kahuna, as we know. So just like the daughter of a chol is pasal to kahuna, so too we're saying the same thing, that a bas ger is also pasal to kahuna. It says Rashi, v'kivan de b'kedushasi koi, and if the kohen maintains his kedusha, lo achla, she can't eat. The amrina and harizu psualoi, v'asa chalol b'biaso, she's pasal to him. He has no right to be married to her, because she is considered to be a chol. So ila b'kedushasi koi lo achla the hamrina and kahal gerim ikri kahal. So if kahal gerim is ikri kahal, then he has no right to be able to marry her, because he's a psuadaka. Il Rabbi Yossi ben b'kedushasi koi ben la b'kedushasi koi achla b'kedushasi koi achla. Why? If he maintains the status of being a kohen, that she can eat. To Omer af ger shenasa gioris bituk sheirul kahuna, because he holds even a ger who marries a gioris, their daughter is still kosher to kahuna. So therefore, there's this woman to be able to eat for that reason. Since it's kahal gerim is loikri kahal, then that means that he's allowed to be married to her, and therefore it's a valid marriage. It's not a problem, and therefore she should be able to eat. A daughter of a convert should not marry a Kohen. It has to be that her mother was Jewish. So even though, let's say, a generation later was before as a generation was a convert, but the mother has to be Jewish. If the mother is Jewish, was born that way, and the daughter is also Jewish, then we allow her to marry a Kohen. This is the question. Kashrus mitoisva ba v'achla, o dilma kedusha mitoisva ba v'lo achla. So the question is, what is all added on? And this we have to see Rashi exactly what this means. So kashrus mitoisva ba uruy l'kahuna is the pshat that this kashrus is added on, and she's actually, this giores is allowed to marry a Kohen, v'lav kedusha likrui kahal, but she's not considered to be kadosh, to be considered to be part of the kahal, and therefore muteres l'psuadaka. So what it means is that there's a din kashrus, but not of that she's kedusha. Therefore muteres l'psuadaka, she's allowed to marry psuadaka. Yocheles memonashach. Dinami kedusha sikai harizu muteres l'm. So she's allowed to marry this man, because if you hold that all it is that there's a kashrus, but it's not that there's kedusha, so therefore she's allowed to marry a psuadaka. And therefore, if you look at it that way, then you would actually say that she's able to eat truma. Odilma kedusha nami itaisla. Maybe actually it's kedusha as well when it comes to this ger. Therefore, the kahal ikre, she's actually considered to be part of the kahal. If she's part of the kahal and the psuadaka is not, then it'd be a surul of psuadaka. She's not allowed to be with the psuadaka, and then lo ochla. Then she would not be allowed to eat. And Rashi gives a lishna achrina. However, let's look at TA10. It only asks us for one. Ma stadim b'kayin psuadaka. What is the different ways to understand a Kohen who's a psuadaka? Shenasa bas ger. He married the daughter of a convert. The imam Yisrael, and the mother is also Jewish. Imochelos betruma oloi. So what exactly is the svara on both sides? So he says like this, and he says, explain it. Leperish harishon barashi. So explaining using the first Pshat Rashi. So he says as follows: Ha'im rak kashrus mitais vaba. If the all it's saying is that she's added on this bas ger, that she is kashrus, but she's not considered to be part of the kahal. Therefore, she's mutter to a kohen psuadaka. But if there's actually kedusha that's added to her, and therefore she's part of the kahal, and therefore she's no longer allowed actually to be part of marrying a psuadaka, then she would be usher to eat truma in that case. So Tashma, Kiyasur Rabbi Acha Bar Chinana Midraima Asa V'Aisi Masnis V'Yadei Menayin L'Psuadaka Kayin. This is going to answer the question right here. How do we know when it comes to a man who's a psuadaka, he's a kohen, Shenasa Bas Gerim, he married the daughter of a convert, Shemachila B'Truma, that we actually do allow her to eat truma. Shenemar V'Koyin Ki Yikne Nefesh Kinyan Kasbo. Yoichel boy. So it says that she's able to eat. Solomon. Who is this like? Elaine Rabbi Yehuda. If it's according to the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, the Armer Bein B'Kedusha Sekoi Bein La B'Kedusha Sekoi Lo Achla. He always said you can't eat. It doesn't make any difference how you look at it, because according to him, she is considered to be part of the kahal. He holds kal gerim according to Rabbi Yehuda. Again, we said because first of all, bas ger zachar kabas chol zachar, and it's allowed by kedusha sekoi. He says kahal gerim ikri kahal. So therefore, she's allowed to marry a yid who's not a psuadaka. So if she cannot marry a psuadaka, she shouldn't be able to eat truma. Via Rav Yossi lamali kra. Rav Yossi says she's always allowed to eat truma. So you need a pasuk. He always holds you could eat. Now, Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov. Rather, it's like this other opinion that we brought down. Shmamina kashrus itaisva bava achla shmamina. It's coming to tell you not that she takes upon herself this level of kedusha, but rather only of kashrus, and therefore she really is considered to be kahal gerim lo ikri kahal, and therefore she's mutter to a psuadaka, and that's the reason why she will be able to eat truma. Itmar. Rav Omer, as we continue inside of the days, yesh chuppah l'psulois, u'shmuel omer ein chuppah l'psulos. What does that mean? Says Rashi, kohen gadol shehichnes almana bas kohen l'chuppah. So this woman is a bas kohen. She's a widow. Now she's not supposed to marry kohen gadol, but the kohen gadol does chuppah with her. Now, v'lo boel, the kohen gadol did not have bia with her, and also mikarin nami lo kidsha. He didn't do kedushin with her either, because we said also in that case it's questionable, as we saw in our Mishnah, to machlokas in that case if kedushin was done, whether or not she could eat truma, if she can continue to eat truma from before. Fil hachi pasal truma. We say that even though kedushin wasn't done, all he did was chuppah. He didn't do bia, because if he did bia, that certainly would according to our mayor from our Mishnah would passel her for meal eat truma. But once chuppah was done, according to this shita, yesh chuppah psulos, it's going to passel her even without kedushin, without bia. The fact that he did chuppah with her, that's it. Shmuel says no, that's not enough. So Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel say umaydili Abba, that Abba will agree to me, and he calls him Abba. Rashi says mishum de kashish mine karile Abba kamolosha nesiv Rabbi. So he called him with great levels of respect. Pitinoikus pchusa mibashol sham yom echad. When it came to a girl, if the kohen gadol would take, and it's hard to imagine almana, but nonetheless, he would say that Rab would agree that this girl was less than 3 years old. The bia is not considered to be a bia. It's considered to be like putting your finger in an eye and tears come out. It's not considered to be a tashmish. Ein lo chuppah. So therefore it's also not a chuppah. So therefore, according to him, he would certainly agree to Shmuel that ein chuppah l'psulos when it comes to a situation where we're dealing with a girl who's less than 3 years old. If we look on page, rather on question 2, is a chuppah psula kiyam amaydi the loy mahani livsul matruma de benasa umatam. So we said if the girl's less than 3 years old, kivan de ein biyasa poisalta koshkin chupasa. This is basically is a quote almost verbatim from the Masechtas Kedushin Daf Yud. Omer Rav Afanami Tanina. We have also a brisa which is in support to this, that it's not going to do anything, that the bia is nothing and the chuppah is nothing. That once a girl is 3 years old, miskadeshes bebia, that's the minimum age for bia. If she was a Yevamot, Shemesh Yavam, and the Yavam did bia with her, that's a kinyan. At that moment, because it's a bia, if a man would commit adultery with her, he'd be chayev. Umatama es bo'ala, latami mishkav tachtan ke'elyoin. So also, she's able to matama her husband if she's a nida, that she can be matama her husband mishkav tachtan ke'elyoin, the bottom like the top. So even though, let's say there's 10 beds, 10 mattresses, she's not touching one of them. She's only touching one of them. It can passel all of them. Says Rashi, Mesechtas nida mafarish la shehe tachtoin shel boil nida ke'elyoin shel zav shematami oichun mashkin ve'matami adam kelim ketachton shel nida atzmashu dekari midras va'avatoma. Ni says once she gets married l'kayin, she gets married l'kayin oichelos b'truma. we allow her to eat truma. Not at the time of Erisin, l'chayr, this is a raya that only at the time of Nisuin. This is why it's brought down, whether or not you're allowed to eat truma. A Bas Yisrael, can she eat truma after Kedushin is done? So it says over here, only Nisus l'kayin achelas with truma, which is mashma before that, B'shas Erisin not. Again, the Gemara discusses over there, maybe this is not a raya. Bo elcha mikol psulais pasla. If any man is boil her who's a apostle, will passel her. However, bashal sham yom echad who the misla babia misla b'chuppah. The only time is dafka if it's 3 years old. Habachusam bashal shanim yom echad deloy mipasel babia lo misla nami b'chuppah shmami na. So it's not going to work. It's not going to passel her. So that's a proof. Okay. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Okay.